Why We Bleep is sponsored by Signal Sounds. Yes, friend, I heard you liked repeating noises. Well, march your derriere via the digital means of a mouse to signalsounds.com, where you will discover all manner of items designed to allow you to make repeating noises most satisfactorily. Signal Sounds stock good stuff, including the lep loop, as used by Mr. Lord Tony of Surgeon. However, it sells out in about 3 seconds when they have them. So instead, may we highlight to you the Herbs and Stones liquid foam, the dopest twin 4-step semi-chaotic gate sequencer and melodic acid bassline generator we've seen all year. It's f***ing great, by the way. That's literally the words that I use to communicate that product. The Korg Op6 Advanced FM Synth for people who don't like FM synths. What? I love FM synths and I want an Op6. They've got them. The Acid Rain Maestro, a very clever CV automation module, and the Rossum Electro Mob of Emus. For the name alone, flip the heck. They have it. All the things you could possibly want to make beautiful, repeating notes. And as esoteric as you like. They have that sort of thing at signalsounds.com. That website again, signalsounds.com. Why? Hi pal. Today we're going to talk to none other than techno royalty surgeon. Not a surgeon that works on your body with a scalpel but with music. Surgeon is probably, you could argue, one of the greatest techno DJs that the United Kingdom has produced. I think that would be a fair thing to say. Certainly well known and certainly well versed. Mr. Anthony Child has been around for a long time, has been there sort of almost since the very beginning. The early 90s is when Tony started first playing. One of my favourite examples of how notable a surgeon is the fact that the Daft Punk track Teachers, which is on the album Homework, one of the early electronic music albums that I heard that really, I was like, this is just an unstoppably great piece of work. The track Teachers, where Daft Punk name check all of the legends and teachers who've taught them what they know and love about dance music. The very final teacher is Surgeon. He is a heck of a person to talk to, and also just one of the nicest, most humble, thoughtful people that you could hope to meet. A very thinky person, very smart, and it's been wonderful to speak to him. Someone, I might add, that I have wanted to speak to since the very inception of this podcast. Tony was absolutely one of those people that was on my radar, like, from day zero. Like, that's who I need to speak to on Why We Bleep. So this is momentous to have him on the show, especially also because seeing Tony playing live was one of my early modular live inspirations as well. Seeing him do it led me to believe that it might be possible that I could try and do it as well. So again, for that reason too, it's especially interesting to pick his brains about playing live, something that he considers himself a live performer. That's what he's been doing for the last few years, almost exclusively. He wasn't DJing for a time. Of course, he is also monumentally a DJ and has decades of experience and can bring that to his modular jams, which is something he mentions. And so this was an opportunity to kind of pick his brains, needle him on the live and improvisational thing, and just generally about techno too. What is techno? What isn't techno? What is playing live? How do you play live? How do you get inspired? And talking about music, and it's a fascinating thing to talk about. There's so much good stuff that is absolutely at the heart of what makes me tick and what I think about that we were able to chat about. So And actually, just at the beginning of this conversation, we were talking about the remote jam that he did on Twitch with Speedy J, which was amazing to me, where it's basically 2 solid hours of Speedy J and Surgeon jamming on bits of kit as if they're in the room together, which is a thing that is like a holy grail. Of course, we do have some amazing remote jamming tools, like I've talked about Endless on here a lot, but Endless is slightly asynchronous, although you can be jamming at the same time that someone else is messing. It was like they were stood next to each other, but Speedy J's in Rotterdam and Surgeon's in Birmingham. And I asked him how it was done. Tony, being the solid gold chap he is, did not say, because I think Speedy J and co, for whatever reason, are not kind of ready to share that, at least when this was published. But suffice to say, because I did some research, that there are remote jamming tools, if you Google for, and I'm surprised we don't talk more about them. Why do we not use them more? I don't know, especially now. So I think that's something that I want to try and research in the kind of coming months. There's stuff to be done there, because clearly it can work. So friend, I think it's time to hand over to the conversation. But one last thing before we do is this sponsored message. Why We Bleep is also sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creative and curious people. It offers thousands of inspiring video-based classes on topics as varied as illustration to graphic design, music production, animation, creative writing, web development, productivity, film and video, you name it. The list, it is long, but the classes are short. Under 60 minutes, with lessons to fit any schedule. This morning, I watched Find Your Style, 5 Exercises to Unlock Your Creative Identity by Andy J. Pizza. And I do believe that is a pseudonym. Andy is an illustrator, and this class literally is that concrete method that he devised to attempt to find and codify your visual style. And now, as I say, he's an illustrator, so this is focused in the class on visuals, but equally applicable to music as well. I've got to say, I was very skeptical going in that a person would be able to give them what I would consider a meaningful way to codify style. Like, it feels like an amorphous of, it feels like something that couldn't be sped along by exercises. But I have to admit, I was pretty impressed. I genuinely think if you follow that through and if you do the exercises, you will be able to put your finger far better on what it is that inspires you creatively. And it could be like quantifying the styles that really speak to you and what you're trying to say musically when you make things. I often don't think about those things. And like I say, I was skeptical that a video class would actually give me something that I would consider like a valid route to explore it. But I have to say, I think it does. It's pretty damn good. So if you're curious to try Skillshare yourself, the first 1,000 people who click the link in my description will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium. Click the link, learn yourself some new skills. And with that, it's time to quote Daft Punk. Surgeon in the house. Yeah.
But it was absolutely amazing when we set it up on the Wednesday before the show, just to kind of test it, and we set it up and we just jammed away for like 3 hours or something. And yeah, like it was really about 10 minutes in, it was like I forgot that we weren't even sort of in the same room. I was so kind of absorbed in that improvisation kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was really amazing, quite emotional to sort of do that this year, to be able to perform and improvise with someone, which for me is my favorite thing to do, performance wise. That real musical connection. It's like exploring different, each part, as it were, of the set is like we're exploring a certain space oh, what's this space? What are the laws of physics in this space? How does it look? How does it sound? How does it feel? And then all of a sudden you enter a different space, and those kind of changes happened. That blew me away. While we were doing it, we would both at the same time decide, okay, we're going into a new bit now. It's really it's a real kind of synchronicity that happens. People ask a lot of questions, and I think as with everything, like to do with my production, everything, I think people overcomplicate the idea of how I approach it. And to me, everything is really quite simple. I mean, how I think of it and approach it. So with improvisation, it's really just opening yourself up to the music and opening your ears and awareness. It's a real kind of meditative kind of state. And if you're in that zone, then it just all kind of flows on its own. You don't have to kind of try and like consciously make it happen. You just follow this thing, and that's just the amazing thing.
When you're playing, like, what can you quantify the types of thoughts you have? What sort of if you do think words when you're doing it, like, what sort of things do you say to yourself?
What I'm aware of is a kind of there's a multi-layered thing going on, and I'm most consumed by this kind of flow state, I've heard it called, or meditative thing. But there's definitely a practical bit of my brain running, but that doesn't kind of get in the way. It's just like I don't know, a script running in the background or something, and that's just dealing with the practicalities of the performance. But I just kind of let that go on in the background. So it's like different layers that are happening at the same time in my brain. That's what I'm aware of happening for me, and I really think it applies to Joachim Speedy J as well. Having spent years and years and years DJing and performing in various ways, I think all of that goes into it, because you get from all of those years of performing, DJing, you get a sense of timing and pacing, and that's really important when you're improvising, so you don't go down this noodle wormhole of like boring the hell out of everyone, where you get kind of stuck. It's yet another layer in your brain of a kind of objective awareness of, okay, we need to change it up now. You can be totally stuck in the groove of what's happening, but there's another bit of your brain, the experienced DJ part, which is aware of the pacing and the structure and telling a story kind of thing. And that's really difficult because time, there's a lot of time distortion involved with improvising. I'm sure you found that too.
Yes, I categorically have.
So how do you deal with how long you kind of spend on each kind of motif or something like that?
The problem is I've definitely had moments where I'm like, shit, that was supposed to be the change, and I've realized too late because I've focused too much on something else. So you kind of almost realize it in retrospect. But generally, I don't know, I feel like when I'm playing with the modular, because I've got or whatever it is, I've practiced, so that I've learned, like, here are various tricks almost, and I kind of vibe between those tricks. Mm-hmm. It's a case of like going, well, I haven't done this, so I could do that, and often for me it's I've usually got a few. I don't use loopers, so I've got available voices, mm-hmm. and I'll usually keep one in reserve. So I'm like, these two things are playing, then I have a third thing I can fade up. When I faded that, I'll fade down one of the other elements, so that in that way we can almost be it's like pass the parcel. You're sort of you're passing on part of it, and you're always changing one thing each generation, and that way you can just keep going. And I've been conscious to think of the word contrasts when I play, because simply to say, if I've been doing loads of stuff, simplify and pare back, and that gives you that natural ebb and flow, which is, because do you see it when you're playing? Do you see it as tracks, or it's you. I don't. I mean, I'm trying to think. I've seen you play several times now. I'm trying to think, but you don't. What I don't see you doing, and maybe that's I've just misremembered, is you're not doing like, sick drops where there's like loads of things that change at once. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I've only got two hands.
Yeah, exactly.
But you're absolutely right about the tool, having a toolbox to draw on. That's definitely another element of it as well. It's like that's something going on in my head where I think if I become aware, okay, I need to do something or change something now, then I maybe draw on the toolbox, like you were saying, of sort of techniques or things you can draw on. But I think I really enjoy about a tool that I really enjoy using is to let it all fall to pieces. I really love that, and I think that's something that people are very often very afraid of doing. But I love that effect, and it's like this. You can kind of, it's like you're spinning 10 plates trying to keep this jam going, and it all starts going wrong and it all starts falling apart. Instead of like desperately trying to grab hold of it and go, no, you just like let it destroy itself, and then the kind of phoenix rises from the ashes and you make something else. I find that a really powerful thing to do, or maybe, I don't know, maybe that's some kind of weird sadomasochistic thing or something.
How do you mean exactly? Can you think of an example like where you?
I don't know if you know what I mean, where it's going wrong. It's like you're doing your jam, it's going wrong, and it's like, oh no, it's all like out of atonal, and I didn't mean it to do that. But instead of like desperately trying to fix it, I just let it just kind of fall to bits.
Yeah.
And then sort of almost start the energy again. It's like an energy wave. If the wave's if the wave's crashing, then I let it crash.
Well, but that would give you a kind of natural, almost finish to sort of songs, if you will. It's like, that's.
I mean, that's not like hopefully not every song ends in disaster. but it's like I just was mentioning it as something that happens at least once in every set. There's a point where it's spinning out of control, and I just let it crash instead of like trying to rescue it.
Because you're playing, well, not always playing techno, obviously, but how do you sort of keep it danceable, though? That's the question. If you're embracing chaos.
Well, there's a kick drum there, and that's what makes it techno.
Just don't take that away.
Yeah, well, yeah, take it away and let's let it spin out of control, and then kind of reform it, and then bring a kick drum back in to kind of hook it back together, maybe.
Could you talk a bit about this? There's loads of variations, and you don't play live any one particular way, and there feels like there's sort of three different systems of yours that I've been aware of. I've seen you play all of them. Like I was at the Royal Albert Hall thing where you played with the music easel.
Oh yeah.
And which was, I don't know if you could see that, but like everyone laid down. Like
oh yeah, no, the Royal Albert Hall. That was actually that was a Pin Electronics Portabella.
Oh, was it?
Like a synthy clone.
Was it? I thought you had the music easel, because I guess I just assumed that and couldn't really see it properly.
I remember that some friends of mine were there, and they said that there was a really irate kind of usher guy who was getting very upset about people lying on the floor.
Yeah, they were getting well officious and sort of like, no, this is the Royal Albert Hall, we have to stand.
Yeah.
It's like, it was standing room, I suppose. Yeah, it was in the back bit, but yeah, they were, and then there was a point where they realised the battle was lost. Actually, they let people lie down, but then there was a point, I think 3/4 the way through, where they're like, this is too much. We can't allow this kind of enjoyment.
Yeah.
Of
this is not British lying on the floor.
God, no.
Yeah, that gig, from my point of view, was quite a struggle, because you see, I do enjoy these quite esoteric machines, but they can occasionally decide they're not going to play along and will kind of resist everything that you try and do.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like having a really trying to perform with an angry, moody person.
I mean, in the classic, like live performer thinks it all goes wrong, way, I was like, this is absolutely brilliant. It was like, there wasn't a moment that I thought you were clearly. I mean, there might have been moments where I sort of see you kind of almost laugh at something, like, which is, you can usually tell that, something's gone wrong, but, it doesn't matter. But it didn't come across at all. It was just like a really well-paced, meditative building, set. It was great.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. I had some good feedback from some people, and that's always, I can kind of forget about my impression of it. Doesn't matter so much in that kind of way. If it comes across, then it worked, and that's more important, that people kind of connected with it. If I'm having kind of performance or technical issues, that's kind of my problem, really. What I really like about those performances, as opposed to the techno performances, and that night was an example of it, where one of the people who organised the night actually came and said to me that they'd never experienced anything like that before. They'd never heard music like that before. It was like a brand new experience for them, and it changed how they thought about music. And that's like, wow, that's the best thing that anyone could possibly say, because for me, that type of music, that idea of music, that approach to music is really something very quite normal and everyday, and has been part of my life for a really long time. And I kind of often forget that for some people that's like a brand new thing. It seems like it seems strange to me. So to kind of widen someone's goalposts of what music is and can be, and also, hearing that music at a volume, that's like more physical, that's something that's very different. A lot of people haven't, they think, oh, it's ambient music, it's just chill out and, it's relaxing, but it can be, as just as heavy as a techno set. It's just got no drums in it.
I suppose you could say Sun are sort of an ambient band.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of them. I'm certainly not a metal fan, but I do very much enjoy what they do.
Yeah, I'm definitely in that camp as well. I saw them at Moog Fest, and it was, I think, someone, I can't remember who said this, but they were like, I love going to see Sun because it's like having an audio bath.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really kind of cleansing, isn't it?
Yeah. Can't think of much else while you're watching it.
The really sad thing about the gig stopping was that the first gig I had cancelled this year was going to be at Cafe Otto, and it was the Transcendence Orchestra, and performing as part of the Transcendence Orchestra that night was going to be Paddy from Nod and Stephen O'Malley from Sun.
Oh my God.
And it didn't happen.
Oh,
so I hope
it could happen still.
Well, I hope so one day. But yeah, it took a lot to like get that to come together, but we were scuppered by a virus.
Get Speedy J's system on the go and see if it can. It wouldn't be the same, and it wouldn't.
Yeah, he needs his special amps.
Yeah, exactly, or 12 of them or whatever. So can you say a bit about, I'm interested in the different systems you give to yourself, like especially just with like how little there is to do. Do you know what I mean? Like how complicated do you make it? How simple do you make it? And also, how do you practice it? Like, what is your technique for sort of saying, well, I'm going to improv this. How do you approach the practicing stage? When do you know that you're done?
I think it applies across all the different setups of the more tonal stuff and the techno live setups. It's just having something that has enough range and something that I feel I'm in control of. Sometimes when I'm using like connecting up a bunch of like more like desktop synths or something, sometimes I'll add too many, and it's like, no, I can't really perform with all these pieces. I don't have enough hands, but a lot of the time I really have this feeling where if I strip it down and just work harder with what I've got, then it's like you can kind of create magic with it instead of just throwing all this stuff out there. You got to work a lot harder, and you've got to have a lot more faith. I think faith is the right word. I often talk about how useful being delusional is. I think that's a very vital part of being a performer, is just having such faith in that what you're going to do. I don't know. I think that carries across. I'm convinced that carries across to the audience, because back to the Royal Albert Hall thing that you were at. On a certain level, I totally accept that what I was doing was absolutely preposterous and absurd, but somehow I managed to kind of sell it to the crowd. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I like that part of it as well. How absurd it actually is.
It sounded good. I mean, I would say objectively, like I'm not even...
Yeah, it has that level to it, but I enjoy how ridiculous it is as well.
I definitely know what you mean about sort of kind of just say almost, not arrogance is the wrong term, but just a sort of willful ignorance that it's going to be fine. I've definitely experienced that when I'm like, I can hand on heart say I have not practiced something enough or even at all, and I've put myself in a situation. I did an improvised thing with loads of the Moog, like the DFAM, 2 DFAMs and a mother, and a drum machine and some eventide effects. And I thought a lot about, I was like, this is how I'll set it up, and I'll just have an 808 and these instruments, which I played lots individually, but I had not done any real significant practicing with that rig. And I was able to just get it set up. I was like, yeah, that's how I would have it. And then played the thing. And it was great.
Good.
And I was like, and I could not believe how good it. And afterwards, I thought, what point was I going to check whether this was going to work?
Do you think that I don't know? Maybe it's part of the delusion as well. But I don't like to over practice something.
Yeah.
Because there's a sort of peak of excitement and interest, and if you go past that, then you're just kind of wheeling it out. I don't know. I hate sound checking. I'll check the level and go, right, I'm good. Because if I sound check it, it gives me some sort of expectation. And when I go back and do the gig, it's not like that. So that really puts me off more than anything.
Do you struggle with, how do you monitor and stuff when you're playing live? Do you have in-ears, or do you do it a different way?
Just, monitor speakers. Just
literally whatever the venue provides, like 2 wedges either side will do.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely more critical than DJ monitors. And I have had a weird situation that involved not being able to hear any kind of sub or lower bass, and that was an absolute nightmare, because I was, I'm doing a set and it sounds terrible.
Yeah.
And so I can't get into it, and it's just like, ugh, yeah, it was a nightmare. But fortunately, usually the monitor situation is usually okay.
I suppose if you've been careful to not give yourself an excessive amount of stuff, it's like there isn't so much to mix, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know, it take care of itself to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is a live mix. I mean, that's like a really key, that's a vital part of it. Balance of levels of the individual parts is vital in how it kind of comes across.
I've really struggled with upper hats and getting them often, when I produce music here at home, I'm always mix percussion way too loud. But when I played on bigger systems, I've consistently mixed it too low. And I've never quite worked out why that is.
I've done it exactly the other way around. Because I always record the set, especially if there's a new element to it or something like that. I want to hear, listen back, and the hi-hats are always this ear bleeding level, and I always kind of mix them a bit too low almost in the studio. But I do play with earplugs in, so I think that might be something to do with it.
But that is wise. I mean, presumably you've got fitted proper.
Yeah, they're the ones that have minus 15 dB kind of filter in it. So they're pretty good. I've used them for 25 years or something.
That's good. was going to say that's like in your profession it's not even it's a ridiculous problem,
Oh, yeah.
presumably for those who do not take care of it. I mean, I've heard producers who've been producing in the studio at just insane levels for vibe in the interests of vibe.
Oh, yeah.
Where I'm like, you are not going to be able to produce records in 15 years.
No.
So.
I actually, some years back, I actually got quite worried about the effect of the volume on my body more as opposed to my ears, just because there seemed to be a bit of an arms race in Holland with the how insanely loud the system was in the club or the warehouse or whatever, and just playing on stages where you put a bottle of water and it's just like leaping in the air, and it's like, oh, what's happening to my insides,
And you like slowly microwaving your inside.
Because I looked up stuff about in kind of like workplace health and safety, and it was like definitely way beyond anything.
Oh, noise level, definitely. Yeah, I did read when I was younger. I was like fascinated with kind of like real world explanations for paranormal phenomena. And standing waves are a thing, like standing waves where you get kind of like a fan in a corridor, and if the fan's rotating at a certain speed, then you get these waves, and apparently like 18 hertz, it makes your eyeballs vibrate and can cause you to see forms in the corner of your vision.
I need to write that down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for your next gig, like see forms.
Yeah,
hit dial down oscillator to 18 hertz.
I'm sure Coil did something with that.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose I would like to talk about your specifically sort of with live systems. I suppose it's kind of I don't know, like as sort of a summing up question is, as you're approaching these setups, is there a sort of common thread? Like, is it the looper? I know you use the Octatrack, and I know you also said you kind of hate the Octatrack. It's a bit of a pig, but presumably you are using it as a looper. And is that an essential component? And what is the sort of common thread? Like, what's the common bit of kit beyond like a mixer that you have between all of the various ways that you play?
I have used a looper a lot, but maybe don't always use it now. But so I had this setup with a music easel, a looper, and I don't know, maybe a delay effect, and it worked really nice because I could clock the looper from the arpeggiator on the music easel, and that way I could play these different arpeggiator rates, but it all kind of lined up and looped perfectly, and it was, it worked. It was really effective. And I'm pretty sure that one day it suddenly occurred to me that up to that point I'd kind of really sort of separated the way that I thought of them in quite different ways, the way that I did the more tonal live sets and the techno live sets. But then it was a technique in the tonal live set that I realized I could draw into the techno live set and do things like, have a sequence playing, throw it into the looper, and then just change the pattern of how that's triggered, or I don't know, a different octave or whatever, and have something that sonically, musically makes sense to be able to play over the top of that, and then maybe eventually add to the looper. And it just occurred to me that it was a way of giving myself another pair of hands or something like that. But it's also this idea of somehow like a time machine or something. I don't know. That's how I kind of thought of it. And also the idea, well, techno is kind of loops, isn't it? And the other thing I found with the chaos, say, of the Eurorack live techno thing, being able to throw it into a looper, but also another technique would be, it's almost like having a long delay that's gradually decaying. So you just throwing part of what you're doing, not everything, of course, into the looper, and it gives a consistency to it. And I really felt the way that was received differently by the crowd. They they accepted it more as techno rather than having all this stuff constantly fidgeting and changing. That seemed to make, I don't know, it wasn't as techno, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can see it like smooths out.
Yeah, it smooths out the loops and the transitions, and things gradually evolve when you're throwing it into a looper. And that seemed to, in quotes, make it more techno, but it's like trying to convince a techno audience to listen to something that's a bit more experimental, but kind of presenting it in this way that is acceptable to them. And I found the looper was quite a big part of that, and obviously having a great big bashing kick drum as well.
Yeah, it always helps.
But yeah, so you've got a kick drum, you've got some, recognizable 909-ish kind of hi-hats, and I think once you've got those kind of signposts, it's techno.
Yeah.
And then the rest of it you can go kind of quite wild with, and it's still somehow accepted. But the tonal performances was something really different, because the script wasn't really written. When people come, they don't quite know what's going to happen. Is this, they sort of think, well, ambient something. But I love the fact that the script isn't so strongly preconceived. And so, yeah, you can really take people far out there.
Just way more, yeah, you can be much more experimental because you've no signposts anymore.
Yeah.
And it's also nice to it's just exploring music that doesn't have a kick, I suppose. It's weird. I don't really do new music that doesn't have a beat of some description. I kind of have, but the only thing I did most with that was on my iPhone, just playing. There's an app that just makes amazing loops with loads of delay, which is, I've actually produced like a load of stuff. In fact, I played at Moogfest with just like an iPhone.
Excellent.
And that app.
I'm sure that annoyed some. Yeah. I'm sure that would really annoy some people.
Like this guy who's like supposed to be like one of those equipment nerds who does YouTube videos, and I've like,
he's playing on his iPhone.
No, my phone. It was a bit of a statement. I was like, good. Well, you don't need all this shit. Like, you really don't. Yeah, I suppose that is a question though. It's like I don't know how to phrase it, but like if you've got some kid who's coming up to you, it's like, dear Tony, I want to play techno. How do I make techno in 2020? What would you advise as the sort of, do you say use a computer or do you say use hardware? In what sort of way, if so?
Well, I've kind of come to realize this where, I think that I could say to someone, oh yeah, you've got to like have a 909 and this and that and the other. But, a lot of people don't have those machines. They don't have the money to buy those machines. So, I think it's wrong to exclude people from the idea of producing electronic music because of that. You can do it. You really can do it with very little, with a laptop. I think you can make it with anything. I think you've just got to put the work in. I think all the time people want a shortcut and an easy, trick or like answer that's like that's going to make it easy and fast. I keep seeing, gear sold with the kind of easy, fast kind of byline. But I think that just if you put the effort in and you really understand music like inside out, you really listen to it properly, I think that's what you need. That's what someone needs to do. I like that. I think maybe Pauline Oliveros said something about the difference. She talked about the difference between hearing and listening. I found that really powerful. That really struck a note with me. How hearing is passive and listening is much more active, and I really, really agree with that.
Yeah, I guess being a DJ, you have no choice but to actively listen because you're sort of...
Yeah, not necessarily though.
Oh, really?
I feel like listening is something I learned from a really early age of being, a really significant early memory for me. I grew up outside Northampton, and like at night I could hear the M1 motorway, and it was basically like falling asleep to a drone every night. So, I would I would be in this semi-conscious state, and I'm listening to this drone, and it's not just continuous; it is changing slightly, and I would, go further and further into that sound, and I just got used to that thing about, I don't know, listening to, now I realize it's an idea of kind of non-music. So I really enjoyed listening to BBC sound effects albums and things like that.
Yeah.
And just really, I don't know what the term for it is, but it's like going right into the sound, like listening so carefully and closely that you're almost inside the sound. And I think that's something that that was like a really important kind of study and lesson for me about the way of listening to music so kind of intently. I don't know if that makes any sort of sense.
No, it massively does. It does. It's like I was talking to Sarah Davachi.
Oh yeah, that was excellent. I'm a big fan of Sarah.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, she is amazing, and exemplifies that. I think it's like, as she said, she was kind of like, the choice is yours if you want to pay attention like enough, and you can consume music passively if you wish. But there's beauty in paying real attention to something, and sort of as a part of that is sort of extending it. And it's that I kept thinking of Paul Stretch. That.
Oh yeah.
If you've met, I love that, and it's. I put the oh my god, there's the Beatles Rain by the Beatles.
Oh yeah.
If you go on YouTube, there is a Paul Stretched version of it, and there's one of the key changes in that. When you hear it, it is when it's Paul Stretched. I mean, even when you listen to the Beatles record, it's brilliant, obviously. But it's like when it's Paul Stretched, and you've been waiting for the sort of that tension to release for.
Oh yeah. I know. I mean, I haven't heard specifically what you're talking about, but I know exactly what you mean about having this. It's like, the change is just pulling you to pieces. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, talking about the Beatles, that was a really significant thing for me, because I didn't grow up with the Beatles, but it was friends at school who kind of introduced me to their stuff, and I got really into their production side of things, especially with the psychedelic kind of period. Yeah. And I got one Christmas, I got a book called The Complete Beatles Recording Sessions, and it's literally what it is. And so you can read about all the techniques and ideas and things that they were doing. And I just, I was fascinated by that. And I decided I wanted to be a sound engineer, pretty much. Amazing. Because of that.
How old were you at that point? 25? Sorry.
No, a teenager.
Yeah.
Oh, but actually, before the very significant thing before that was my school library I found a book in my school library called Composing with Tape Recorders, Music Concrete for Beginners. And I loved it. I actually stole the book. Sorry. Stopping someone else having the chance of being influenced by that. But it's this really practical guide to making experimental music, and it was amazing. But the crazy thing was, I was really influenced by that, but I'd never heard any music concrete. It's only what I'd read in this book and imagined.
Oh wow! Did you make some then, having not heard it but imagine what it could be like?
There's actually Carl from Downwards actually released a 7-inch of my early experiments. It's called Boys, School Showers and Swimming Pools.
Wow.
Which is actually it's a reference to William Burroughs, who is another.
Okay. Yeah.
William Burroughs, the Brian Gysin cut up technique.
Yeah.
That was another thing that was a huge influence for me. It seems quite quaint and simple now, but my young mind was absolutely blown by the idea of taking something and cutting it up and putting it back together.
Can you think why were you, of all kids, why do you think it struck you?
I don't know. There's probably some like psychological reason, but I don't know. I mean, I'm sure. Do you know why certain things really
I'm
struck
trying
you
to,
as a kid
no,
or
I'm trying to
whatever?
work it out. I don't know. I think certainly there's, I don't know. I think it's, when I think about like the early electronic music that I liked, I was like a child of the late 90s. And so it was, you know, it was Orbital and stuff like this. And I saw Orbital play in 1999. And that was actually the first gig I saw, which is a pretty good start. But yeah, like for me, it was the impossibility of what they were doing. That was seeing something fully formed. It was like being hit by, something that had been developing for 30 or 40 years at that point, sort of electronic music. And then, so it wasn't an introduction in the sort of, in that sense where your own one is sort of almost in the tributary of what becomes, or it is electronic music, but it's earlier. And I can see that for a kid, it's that idea that that idea of almost seeing things be used in a weird, broken way. If you know that tape machines are just used to record bits of music off the radio and that's it might never occur to you that you could layer and distort and mess with. You're like, oh, like there are ways to break this that are considered, okay. I suppose that is an amazing thing. It's knowing that the world can be, you're allowed to be naughty and sort of do things that are not.
It's rearranging things. But it reminded me, I think I might be wrong, but I think there was a TV series in the 80s by James Burke. I might be kind of mixing stories together here, but I think it was called The Day the Universe Changed. And it's about, he was talking about astronomical discoveries. That's it. And, there was a discovery and someone realized, oh, the Earth is not the center of the solar system. And it's like, that was this idea of effectively the universe changes because of a change in thought. And that really, so that's how it was when I saw about cut-ups or read about, the Beatles using tape loops and the Music Concrete book and stuff like that. It just, it shifted, that thing I said before about shifting the goalposts of what is possible. And I don't know, it's just ever expanding. So that was just really exciting to me at the time, and still is. I'm still having my my goalposts altered. That sounds so ridiculous, but I still.
It's all you can ask for. Isn't it?
I'm still discovering music all the time. I've been on this real plunderphonics thing recently with I don't know, just going back to like John Oswald and the Residents, and then I don't know, just like up to newer things like One O Tricks Point Never, and I don't know, Vaporwave, and I was aware of it, but then I've done some crazy wormhole dive into all this. I don't know, I guess maybe Vaporwave stuff. There's this label called Orange Milk Records that's just absolutely frying my brain at the moment. Just a Bandcamp label, but they're just, some of the stuff is just absolutely insane. I love it. It's really good.
How would you describe it? What's the music like?
Well, it's really varied. I mean, some of it's kind of ambient, some of it's very plunderphonics, like very jarring and cut up, and some of it's like really mutated kind of grime, but all of it's just really out there and pretty wild, just going too far with whatever it is they're doing.
It is a funny thing. I don't sit down at these tools and sort of think like today I'm gonna do something that offends me. Do you know what I mean? Or like that's something that is so different. I don't know how you, as a musician, I suppose I'd have to ask them, but it's like, how do you arrive at the very fringes of what is possible with music as your sort of goal? It's an interesting one because I can't imagine it's an easy ride. Well, I suppose like the minimalist composers where you've got people sort of standing up and screaming in the middle of a performance.
Oh yeah, I love that. I will admit that I'm massively inspired by artists who are just so out there and so uncompromising, but I don't see myself in that way. I like to draw from that, but I want to somehow get it across to people. I want to not make it palatable, but I want to transmit it. I want to take this wild out there thing, but somehow get it across, or just lead people into it somehow. There's you start off in an easier way, and you gradually draw them into the craziness. It's not so much sort of hitting people over the head with it.
Yeah, sort of classic, like any good DJ set that just takes you to places.
Yeah, hopefully.
I thought one of the most sort of incredible DJ moments I ever experienced was at Houghton. I was watching Optimo, and we're all sort of they were playing some techno-y thing at that point, which was quite late in the night, and they then dropped, just apropos of nothing, slammed into "Lay All Your Love on Me" by ABBA, and everyone, without fail, lost their minds.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's amazing. One of those moments where to drop something such a curveball can go wrong, but when it goes right, it's so amazing.
I don't know what passes through a DJ's mind where they're like, this is gonna slay them. This is gonna work. Do you know what I mean? Is that sort of, as a DJ, I don't know how you think through like decisions like that. Whether it just depends. I suppose it depends. It depends on the crowd and the attitude.
If I've ever done anything approaching that, it's always been a spontaneous urge to be naughty.
Yeah,
and or it actually seems like it's a good idea
in that moment. Can you think of examples of what's the naughtiest thing you've played?
Yeah, I don't know. I think just anything I say is going to just sound really boring. This doesn't sound that crazy, but there have been quite a few times when I've played Patrick Cowley Megatron Man in a totally, like, a very straight techno club, and the whole night's been very straight techno, and then all of a sudden Megatron Man comes and it's like people really get into it, but kind of despite themselves. I don't know. You kind of have to be there, but it is kind of funny, but it's like, this could go really wrong. But, I sort of feel like if I mix it in, I'm committed to it. I'm not going to bottle it. And
it's funny thinking about, I grew up in the countryside, and sort of, I never went out much when I was a kid, and as a teenager, I was like an indoor kid, like made music and played around and was a nerd and didn't dance. And that changed as time went on. I was much, much older, like very late to it. And it was, what struck me was was thinking about what clubs were like before you actually go to them, and how you think of a club as a sort of quite threatening, sort of almost like you're going into an alleyway or an illicit place. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the real experience of clubbing, and especially depending on what is ingested when you're going clubbing, is this sense of kind of fun.
Yeah.
And it's the sort of, it is a spirit of fun, which, and I've been fortunate to, there's some of the events I've been to that are just, they really celebrate that. And there's musical choices, and I've also recognized that I don't know if you would agree with this, that like in the best nights that I've been to, there's almost a sense of theatre. There's literally almost a theatrical act, like there's things going on, or there's just that sense that you're witnessing strange, fantastic, bizarre things, and it just engenders this whole kind of this just sense of like fun and possibility and mirth, which then is combined with dancing. And I don't know, I know it's not really a question, is it? I mean, it's more of an observation.
I agree. The best experiences have been, you're in this space, and it's like it's a parallel universe. It's like different rules apply. But I was going to go back to saying, I mean, I wasn't like someone who went out loads, but I feel like I did experience the nightclub scene, let's say pre-ecstasy.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was, back to what you said, it was scary. There was a lot of violence, and I went because I was interested in the music, and I just felt like I was scared to look at anyone because they would want to have a fight with me. That's how it felt.
Were there fights?
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, these were actually like under 18s events, so there wasn't even any alcohol involved. But I think everyone there looked up to their older brothers and sisters and saw what they were doing, and they wanted to kind of replicate that, and that involved a lot of violence. So I really did not enjoy clubs, and like you were saying, it was so the sort of the post rave landscape that just really that changed everything, and it was amazing. And I really saw how the nights that we did in Birmingham House of God, it really was this group of misfits and weirdos and everyone who was interested in clubs but wasn't a clubber. So it was just like punks and hippies and just everyone, ravers, just a weird mixture of people all kind of jumping around, and it was amazing.
I suppose that one of the questions actually would be interesting is how has your studio changed over the years, particularly because it's sort of tracking the evolution of your own relationship with making music. What was your first setup? I actually don't know that.
It has changed a lot. The first setup I had was a Korg Poly 800, and it's funny because often people say, "Oh, what did you make your first tracks with?" And I say, "I can tell you, but just don't buy it. You're going to hate it. You will hate it so much."
I hope you like buttons.
Yeah. Korg Poly 800, and there is, I believe, an English company called Cheetah who is known for kind of MIDI keyboards and stuff. They had a drum machine. I can't even remember what it. I don't even
look like a grey slab.
Yeah, I don't think it even had a name. had a red cheetah on it though. And so the keyboard was mine, and my friend Neil, that was his drum machine, and my first stuff was written on that. And the first couple of records I did were recorded in Mick Harris's studio, and Mick was the drummer in Napalm Death.
Wow.
And
okay.
He was a real musical mentor for me. That he was very important. We sort of lived in the same area of Birmingham, and there were kind of, it was a very kind of bohemian area, and a lot of bands and artists and people like that lived there. So there's, a big, wide group of acquaintances and stuff. And we got to know each other because we shared a kind of interest in Mike Leigh films and Coil and techno and stuff like that. And because at the time, I knew two people who liked techno. But he let me use his kind of home studio. I brought the keyboard and the drum machine over on my back, kind of carried it on my back pretty much. And he let me use his mixing desk, and he had some outboard gear and stuff and a DAT player. So I just recorded some tracks.
Just what, to tape or sequenced, or how would you?
It recorded them to DAT tape. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of those, but
oh yeah, of course. It'll be coming back soon. Don't you worry. The sound of that.
What the early, and this is something that I've kind of rediscovered, is the physical element of how I used to make techno. I realized for me it works best to perform it and not to program it. I'm not a programmer. I'm a performer. So I set it up, and I in that. Very totally influenced by the sort of King Tubby dub style of playing the mixer. So I split the drum parts, and I just flick the faders up and down, and I just arrange it like that. And I have either one drum pattern or a simple arrangement, and just one keyboard line, and I just manipulate that and just kind of dub it live. And all the early music up to about 98 something ish was just done that way, just with some hardware,
just mixer jams basically on hardware.
And it start the DAT, do a jam, keep an eye on the time on the DAT. Okay, 5 minutes, that's it. And just do no more than 2 takes.
Right.
If you totally screw it up, then do another take. But I wasn't into 20 takes or something, because it's just no, you squeeze the life out of it.
That's interesting. Yeah. I did wonder, I was going to ask you, like, how, genuine question, how the hell do people make techno on, like, a DAW?
Well, I did go towards that, and I got Logic Audio, and I loved it because being able to kind of multi-track audio and stuff like that, you know, it was really what I was at that time. I was really frustrated by the limitations of how I used the hardware and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I did the first kind of project was the album called Force and Form. And that had a lot more I mean, you can hear it now. There's a lot more kind of music concrete elements in there, sort of ending parts of the tracks and stuff like that. So yeah, I got really into the computer thing, but like I said, I realized I'm not a programmer, so I just got my kind of productivity went after the initial kind of interest in it. I kind of got really stuck with it, and found it really hard to make music, to be inspired, to create a starting point. And that's where I started getting into Eurorack. I can't remember what year this was, but I did some gigs with Jamie Blawan, and he was using it, and I was like, wow, that really looks like fun. Oh yeah, I'd forgotten about that thing called fun. Yeah. What about fun? Oh yeah. So yeah, it really was like that. It was a bit of a shock. And another really significant key thing that I saw was there's a video on Vimeo of My Brain Is Getting Old. He was really famous for always performing with a booklet easel.
This is Charles Cohen.
Exactly. Okay.
I knew.
Charles,
I could read your mind. I knew what the video. You were talking about the one with those like really beautiful camera work on it.
Yes. So I saw that, and I was like, "Oh my god, that is so much fun!" It was so like playful, you know. Just you know what I mean. It was like, wow.
I do.
And I wonder how many easels that video sold. So I immediately put my name on the waiting list at Schneider's in Berlin for an easel. And I think I ordered an easel, and I was too impatient to wait, so I started buying Eurorack
Wow.
gear in the meantime. And another example of my impatience is there's a video of me like a boiler room at Deckmantle where I've got a beard and there's all these people around me and I'm playing.
Yeah, I know that video well. I've watched it many times.
I bought my first Eurorack module 2 months before that.
Oh, wow.
I didn't realize at the time, but someone said something about that, and I kind of looked it up and I was like, oh God, yeah. So I'm just stupid.
You had it like Ableton on a laptop. You're sort of DJing. And
I started out like that, where for years and years, I kind of DJ'd with Ableton, and a lot of people really hated it, but I enjoyed what I could do because I could combine a lot of different music styles and kind of present it in this techno kind of sandwich way kind of thing. And so, yeah, I got this Eurorack gear. The idea was to use it purely in the studio, but then I hauled it off to a gig and I was like, oh my God, that's so much fun, because I figured out this way of syncing it with Ableton with, I think, putting a clock pulse in one of the kind of drum machine things and
feeding it
out of the headphone output or something.
Yeah,
that worked. That was really effective, and I could sort of shift it enough and sort the latency out and whatever. And I started doing gigs like that with, you know, Ableton kind of backing stuff and then jamming over the top of it. And over a fairly short amount of time, I used the laptop less and less, and eventually, literally all it was doing was telling me what time it was. So I was like, time for the laptop to go. I should just get a watch. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to stop DJing, and I just only perform live for 3-4 years or something, to really, because that's just what I was focused on.
You did use the Octatrack though. Was the Octatrack playing track or like music, other people's tunes? Or
let me think. See, I used it, and then I stopped using it, and then I've used it again in a different way, and now I don't use it again. But no, it's this thing. I like to hold on to gear. I never sell anything, because so many times I've ended up reusing something in a different way.
Yeah.
So I think the Octatrack gave me a few more percussion sounds. I think that was the master clock. I think I had the headphone output again, just playing like a pulse in the same way I said before, and gave me a few more percussive sequences. And I guess I used the looper as a looper, a kind of dual looper. Then I think I started using, there was like this dual delay looper.
Yeah, the 4MS
Exactly.
DLD.
Yeah. I'm glad that you can jog
So I've been following very closely
my memory. Oh right, yeah. I'm pretty sure you could probably tell me about my live setups.
Well, I mean, it's enough. There have been some funny moments. Like I remember an occasion where one night back when I lived in London, that we were like, it was late. Everyone's like, "Oh, I'm going to stay out," and we're sort of like walking across East London, try and find somewhere to go. And someone gave us here's free entry to a place we'd not really heard of, and we went in, and it was filled with smoke. And I was like, "Oh, it's techno. They're playing techno." And I got to the front, and you were playing.
Oh wow! Where was that?
It was at Block. It was at Block a few years ago, and I just was like, that's Surgeon, and he's playing with he's got his circadian rhythms and his Octatrack, and sort of doing that, leaning over and like, well, what's he doing? What's he doing now? Like that whole thing. But it's impossible to unpick someone else's modular, especially upside down in smoke.
Yeah, 100%.
Even harder.
Yeah, you can't figure out how, even if you realize what modules they've got, it's just, well, how is it all connected together? It makes, but yeah, the setup would sometimes change quite rapidly, maybe too rapidly, because there's a period of getting used to and comfortable with something. But maybe that was part of it, and this goes back to the studio setup thing as well. This is something I've found over the years. If I hit upon kind of a winning formula or setup or something, I'm really aware of a point where I start getting lazy, and it's like, right, time to burn it to the ground. And it's the same with the live setups. If it's getting too smooth, do you know what I mean? Over several gigs, it starts getting a bit smoother, and I purposely change it to not have it as smooth, because I don't want it to be smooth.
Can you clarify in what way you don't want smoothness? Like, because I don't know, what you're describing sounds like, the blessed relief, like, oh my God, thank God it's finally working. And then it's like,
it's just not exciting. And I really, really believe that this transmits to the crowd. I'm convinced that on some kind of, people don't have to understand what Eurorack is or how I'm playing live. That's irrelevant. But they can hear that it's not as perfect as a DJ playing a track, and I'm convinced that they can sense that this is being created in that moment, and there's something really special and powerful and different about a live act in that way. I don't know. That's quite an important part of techno for me, a roughness. And yeah, it's a Kraftwerk thing. It's this relationship between a human and a machine, and having a roughness is the human part. And when you polish that and polish it and smooth it, it's just a machine. And I love that awkward relationship between a human and a machine. That is fundamentally what is exciting about electronic music for me, is that relationship, and that's what I want to project. And I totally believe that is really exciting for an audience, whether they know it or not. I don't know. I just through gigging, this is my insane acid-addled experiences. Does that make sense? Yeah,
totally. And I'm just only trying to quantify the sort of what aspect of it, because it's something I think about a lot. It's like, I think about what I consider valuable in a live music experience. It's why I also have done improvised sets when I could so very easily laboriously pre-write a set and form it and do some basic changes. Like, obviously you can do that. Like, it's been done, but like part of it, like if I reference Orbital, you know, when I was 16, I didn't know how any of it was done. So it was absolutely magical. But of course, as I grew to understand the equipment, then I can perceive what they're doing. And some of the magic is lost. It's just the same as knowing how a magic trick is done, where it's like it's not as fun if you know, oh, you dropped it in your hand and the ball went in your pocket. It's a tricky one, because I can certainly also say that I've personally had some really good experiences of live music where the performers, like, you know, whimsically hidden themselves so that I can't see what they're doing, and I have no choice but to just appreciate the music on its fundamental own terms. I have enjoyed those shows, but I guess it's you know, the way I thought about it is electronic music is fundamentally, on many levels, is divorced from kind of live music played with traditional instruments, because it's so easy to pre-record things. But by doing improvisational things, then it's the most live that electronic music can be. It's to make it has a jazz equivalent of like jazz music.
That's really true. I hadn't actually thought of it in that way, but I strongly agree with that. I was thinking about how my cats always gate crash every stream, interview, everything I do. So I'm going to try and stop them like knocking things over. I for quite a long time I've been really obsessed by, you know, thinking about different levels of performance. So I really think about how, you know, the way that an audience connects with someone standing on stage playing a guitar, even if they can't play a guitar, they have a sense that the performer is moving their hands up and down and the notes are changing. So that's really powerful. Actually, there is have you seen this Charles Cohen video where he's doing this interview?
Don't think so. I've only seen the whimsically shot one.
I really need to send this to you because Charles Cohen interview, 19th of July 2015.
Yeah.
Okay.
I see it. We'll link to it.
I strongly recommend watching that. For me, that is like the holy grail and 10 commandments of improvising.
Right.
That sums everything up. The bit I was telling you about, how you can see someone moving their hands and getting a sense of, you know, that's basically straight from there. I keep like virtually quoting bits out of it and going, no, that's actually, those aren't my words. Those are his. But really, amazing stuff.
I remember a friend of mine telling me about a gig he played where he brought loads and loads of gear. He had like a Pro One, he had like a 707, loads of stuff, like tons of gear, like set it all up, was absolutely sweating buckets, like trying to get it all to work. It didn't work, got it working, played his set, played the shit out of it, like put his heart and soul into it. And at the end of it, stopped playing and the audience was just staring at him. And they were staring and there wasn't a word of applause or anything. And it was because the setup in the club was that he was raised up and there was a sort of DJ booth that was above everyone and no one could see what he was doing and they just thought he was DJing.
Oh, no.
And there's just no way they could possibly have known that he was creating the music in real time in front of them. You know, it's that sort of, that's the issue that I mean, I've had that sometimes where I'm like, I've played to absolutely no one. Not a soul, one or two souls who've drifted past at certain festivals. And, you know, if I feel that if they could see the system and see that it was going, you know, perhaps they would know. But then another part of me is like, why should they care? You know, why should it matter that what's the difference between seeing me with this funky box of wires versus seeing someone with, you know, a CDJ and a mixer and like,
but you know, that's, it's great when people can see you with your rack and gear and whatever, because that's a big part of the show.
Yeah,
I saw how people reacted to that. People were like, "What the hell is that?" And it's funny that it was like that to so much extent, to such an extent that I kind of stopped using that gear because I felt like it was the only thing that there was about me. And
Right.
I don't know. I've kind of played around with a lot of different things over the years, and I don't know. I somehow feel uncomfortable about being pinned down to something, and I really felt like I was the modular guy, and I don't know. I can't really explain why, but that kind of made me stop using it, which is silly.
Do you still? Well, you presumably not sold it.
No, but again, it's like that thing. I know it's there, and I'll probably use it in a different way or something because it's obviously very flexible.
How do you think about changing your setup? Like, what is when you're like your current thing is the Bleep?
Yeah, currently. Oh, did you see the street? Oh, yeah, we already talked about it. Sorry, the thing with Speedy J. Yeah.
Yes, you had I think you had a BeatStep Pro, and you might have had a modular.
I had it was a BeatStep Pro controlling a Pulsar 23.
That was it. Yes, flipping heck.
And
I've got the Lyra.
Oh yeah, I really see after the modular thing. And maybe back to the easel. I realized I really loved very, I don't know, idiosyncratic, if that's the word, instruments.
Devices. Yeah.
And the same for, like Eurorack modules as well, oscillators, whatever. I was a big fan of the whimsical raps kind of stuff.
Oh my God, they are very whimsical as well. And esoteric.
Yeah, they were absolutely my favorite filters and oscillators and everything. So yeah, I just got into this idiosyncratic instrument thing, and that's kind of what I've been pursuing lately, and that's why I got the Portabella, the kind of synthy type thing, and then got into the Lyra and the Pulsar. That just kind of I don't know, that suits me and speaks to me. I connect with an instrument that makes you submit to it. I don't know, there's something, it's back to that. It's a really important part in the improvisation and, that surrendering, like I was saying about letting the track fall apart. It's like not, you're gently guiding what's happening, but there's a sense of not, it's like cooperating with the machines. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
That's when it works really well, when you're kind of cooperating and you're kind of working together and you're not trying to kind of dominate the machines. This is all getting a bit kinky. Maybe I'm revealing a bit too much. Yeah, a bit Berghain, yeah.
That's all right.
I'm all right with that.
Well, especially obviously if you like the chaos. And, if you want your set to fall apart, you want equipment that is esoteric. You shouldn't know
exactly
quite what each thing is going to do. And then therefore there's a likelihood you're going to do the wrong thing. It's like that sort of and I'm sure it's the same for you. There's like the earliest music you've wrote, when you listen back to it, there is always a naivety and a sort of slightly rubbishy aspect. But then there is also a kind of, I don't know how to describe it. There is a sort of charm and freedom.
Well, it's honest, and I think that's a really important thing for me about music.
Do you mean not trying to be sort of cool and doing things for effect, but doing things in a genuine?
I don't know, kind of, but it's hard to quantify. But it's something that I feel when I make music that I want it to be. Yeah, I don't know. I can just describe it as wanting it to be honest. But the chaos thing is really, that's really powerful. I think chaos is a very powerful thing to kind of plug into and to kind of use and celebrate. Yeah, the Turing machine and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. But then it's that the Turing's like the perfect techno version, because then it can be looped.
Oh yeah.
Is techno not? I think I'm going to quote you.
Oh, no.
I'm pretty sure you've said like you can define techno as sort of anything repeated more than once. Is maybe I'm paraphrasing.
I think it's isn't that isn't that the jazz thing? If you make a mistake, you just got to make.
Do it again, baby.
There you go. Yeah, there's jazz. But yeah, that's where the looper's great, because if you make a mistake and it's in the looper, after about 5 loops, you're like, oh, this is great.
Do you have? I mean, are there any other sort of things that? We talked about the things that are in your mind as you play, but it's. I've had to stop myself from doing things. I get, there is that sort of time dilation, and one of the things is to not. I've learned the way that I play my modular, and I learned it from Stevie O by just watching him and watching what he does. But is to you kind of have to give up on that concept of drops and making, because it's in a sense, and it's what's so great about records is obviously so much can happen, and it's a very scripted, potentially a scripted, or it's a well-defined journey that the record sets up. Whereas if you're making it up in the spot, but you want to have surprising sort of drops and those impactful moments where something just comes in, and that's really hard. And I suppose the one thing that I've thought is don't take things away. It's really tempting to mute things, but instantly pull them off, but that usually can end in disaster because you mute the wrong thing. Do you know what I mean? It's I suppose can you distill it's obviously based on many, many years of playing records, but talking about structure specifically, is there any advice that you would offer to someone who is playing live?
This is funny because I think I'm remembering this correctly, but I'm sure that I watched one of your videos about doing a techno improvisation, and I think you might have been talking on it.
Yeah.
I found it really funny because you said something about a technique to do with muting or fading things out or in, and you mentioned me, and the funny thing was, whatever you said was the opposite of the way that I did it.
Oh wow! Okay, good.
No, but it was funny. No, it was to do with because you were saying about not taking things out gradually. Yeah, because my key is to bring things in gradually, but it's probably both.
I basically was I'll bring things in gradually, but don't take them out immediately.
Yeah, it's funny because I heard you say that, and I thought, well, it kind of depends. The way that I do things like that, it relies on the intuition I've learned from DJing about structuring and stuff like that. I would say that's what I rely on. But the fading things in is because I'm not previewing. Say I'm using the Turing machine. I'm not previewing sequences.
Yeah.
And I fade it in, and if it's a really naff sequence, at least I've got a chance to kind of. You've got to go with it, but you can kind of make it a bit better somehow, or I don't know, do something to it to kind of save it.
I think that I do that as well, because as I say, when you're handing one, you're bringing in, fading up something. I have the Bifaco Hex Mix, which does have PFL. But I never use it. I've never used it. I might have used it once or twice just to check what sample of radio music was playing, but I would always just fade in and just generally do that. But I think it was more what I recognize, and the mistake that I've made, and what I was trying to stop myself from doing is muting the bass or muting. It's that moment of muting the one really central core part of the tune that's holding it all together. And when I've done that and messed it up, it's sort of devastating. It's like the whole heart has fallen out of the track, as it were. And so it's a reminder to don't pull things out quickly. But definitely slamming things in, especially with hats and things, to step things up is can be so amazingly brilliant if it's if you're in control enough to anticipate the moment to do it and you've got your finger in the right place. But it's sort of, I don't know, what I learned from Stevie-O was that concept of trying to sort of move away from doing, kind of bringing that in quick, and then potentially also encouraging yourself to take that out quickly, because you sort of, it's almost trying to replicate what's possible with an arrangement, and it's very hard to do with just one pair of hands. And it's better to sort of embrace and almost warm the audience into a state of we're just going to have this slowly evolving thing that it'll always be changing. Like, Eliane Radig, it's sort of her music. If you listen at any one point, it sounds static, but if you listen for more than 1 second, it's always changing. It's just changing really slowly so that you can't quite perceive where all the changes occur. And that means that from 1 minute to the next, it could sound completely different, but you're not necessarily aware of those changes. And that's a way of playing that's much more possible to do as a solo player. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm just going to have to let the cat out of the room because it's staring at me. Yeah. The cat always hijacks these things, but it's gone now. The thing you said about Eliane Radig reminded me, when I was at school, there was an art teacher he wasn't my art teacher, but he was the teacher of some of my friends, and he used to play records at during lunchtime. And I remember it was another one of these the universe changed moments for me. He played me No Pussyfooting by Robert Fripp and Brian Eno, and I'd never heard music like that. So he played it for a little while and he said, "It doesn't sound like it's changing, does it?" And then he skipped the needle across the side, because the track was like the whole side of the vinyl, and you could hear as you skipped it, like a centimeter at a time, you could hear how it was changing. And that just showing me that just totally changed my musical universe. That was probably the most significant thing I learned during my whole time at school. And he wasn't actually my teacher.
Yeah, nice. It did sound, you were doing that with the Speedy J Jam, was like, had that slow evolving kind of thing. It was like, I couldn't tell who was doing what, and I couldn't really, there are certain moments where you can definably hear one thing coming in, but not much. Like it felt very, very fluid in that sense.
Performing with him seems to really bring that out in me. That's something I've noticed. Every person, if I perform with one other person, what I do is feels to me completely different with each different performer, because it's working with what they're doing. So yeah, when I perform with him, it tends to be these very long evolving sets where it's nice to sit down and it's quite effortless to play. It's very easy to play for 2 hours, but when I do sets with Colleen, they're much more kind of a high impact, quicker.
I did see there's a wicked video of you playing with her. There's a moment where I think you made a mistake and she sort of leans across and goes like at you, which is good. It's that sense of fun. It's like, I just think techno is sort of definitely takes itself incredibly seriously a lot of the time, and I 100% don't think that's a healthy thing to. It's okay to sometimes be like dead serious, but I just also think there's a sense of fun and play. And
yeah, I really, during the rather long time I've been involved with it, the reason I'm still involved with it is because I believe it's such a flexible form of music, whereas many styles of dance music are really defined by very particular patterns, rhythms, or sounds. But I think that techno is a much wider form, the way I view techno anyway, and it's like this thing that you can bend and stretch really far, and it's like how I kind of feel like I do that a lot, where it's like, how far can I stretch this thing before people go, hold on a minute, that's not techno. You've gone too far. That's like an aim of playing around. It's like a form, playing around with a form. And, I found it to be really flexible and fun. And unfortunately, we don't have it now, but, having a physical element to it is really powerful, to this underpinning rhythm and repetition. It's really surprising what you can do as long as you have that there.
I can't think of any other style other than like sort of noise music where it's okay to just pretty much loop anything. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like it's true. I love electro as well, and it's sort of there's a kind of I feel like electro and techno are close to each other in the sort of musical spectrum. If there is a spectrum, they're like cousins. And but yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. That was one of the questions I wanted to sort of settle an argument, which is like, when is electro techno, and when is? Do you know what I mean? Like, can you have are you allowed to have an electro record that's got a 4/4, or is that a techno record? It's
well, I would say that I would say that electro is a kind of techno, but techno is not a kind of electro.
Well, that's good. Yeah,
that's how my personal. This is not like set in stone, obviously, but for me, my idea of techno really encompasses a lot of styles, much to the annoyance of some techno fans.
Yeah, I sort of don't get that. Why would anyone complain?
Yeah.
Like,
I've had angry shouting. I've had things thrown, more angry shouting, to which I give a thumbs up. This is not always the case, fortunately, but there are times when it can be a really very conservative scene, which is, that often seems to happen, doesn't it? It's something, I don't know, I'm sure that's like can be the same with jazz, where it can start out being very radical and experimental and then
becomes ossified.
Exactly, yeah. And that is I'm so against that.
It seems weird to me, and my understanding of techno is to, I mean, there is Kraftwerk called their music techno at one point, and then there's that phrase proper techno, which I like. And in fairness, I do understand what that means. I understand that is supposed to mean really stripped, brutal, take your top off, like 4/4 with a very angry noise. That's like.
I mean, I definitely experienced the Detroit techno thing with, that sense of that was where, what do you call it? The fountainhead or something of a certain of that kind of style of music, and the that went along with all when I first started doing gigs in Europe. All just the majority of the artists I played with, the guest artists were black DJs from Detroit, and that's something that's very, very different now. I'm always really interested to keep at least half an eye on stuff that's going on like that, because it can be quite exciting hearing new kind of mutations of the DNA. There was a kind of a Mad Mike quote that I really loved. He said that, I'm not going to quote it perfectly, but he was talking about how techno was a virus, and it's like you can't kill it and it keeps mutating. And that's kind of how I see it. It's this thing there's a DNA that is techno, but it alters and mutates and takes on different forms and goes on different tangents. But to me, it's all this same kind of DNA of electronic body music. I don't know if that's the right thing to call it. Don't know what I'm talking about anymore.
Just think it's weird that people would try and fence it in, and in a sense that there are certain I
think it's just human. I think it's human nature, though, isn't it? I don't know. I have this kind of really fundamental idea about how incredibly chaotic the universe is, man. And this is really upsetting to human beings. They do not like this chaotic universe. They don't want to accept that pandemics sweep the globe and there isn't like a conspiracy theory behind it. They want to give it a meaning, even if it's preposterous. And I don't know why I started talking about that. Oh yeah, no, we were talking about how people want to kind of categorize and stratify things. They want to make sense of the world, the chaos in the world,
and therefore put music in a box.
There you go.
Yeah. So, question is, and last question is, what is the future of music technology?
I don't know. I don't know. I remember hearing or reading something about how in Victorian times. This isn't actually an answer to your question. This is like a bit of a swerve. I have to be honest, but I remember hearing that in the Victorian times, some, I'm sure, English scientists pronounced that everything that there was to be discovered in the world of science had been discovered. So we can draw a line under it all now. And I often feel like some people are kind of like that when it comes to techno or dance music or anything in general. And it's another one of these things I fundamentally disagree with, where if I really think if the music you're into feels stale, and you got to look somewhere else. It's happening somewhere else, and it's there's something exciting somewhere hidden under a rock somewhere. You're just not looking in the right place. But I don't know what that totally wasn't an answer to your question though.
It is. It's like keep looking for.
Keep searching. It's
It would be important to stay. Yeah, it doesn't have to be about technology, but to remind you that technology is supposed to serve the creation of music. So, looking for new music is and not being. It's that thing of having all this technology and then being in your mind compartmentalized by tropes and patterns.
It's us that holds ourselves back. It's like, in terms of music technology, I'm finding new machines like with the Soma stuff, I don't know, maybe not everything they're doing is brand new, but they're giving you a new way to interact with it or something. There's always something you haven't thought of. And it's that thing about if you're kind of drawing a line under all possibilities. I just don't agree with that. There's always something on the horizon somewhere.
Cool. Thanks very much. Boom. What a lovely chap. Love that guy. Love how he talks and thinks and love what he does. More power, Tony Surgeon. And thank you so much for giving your time up, and apologies to your cats who were less well attended to because you were being held down in front of your computer talking to me. Yeah, wow. I love that. Do you remember that quote he said? It's us that holds us back. It's us that holds us back. Technology is obviously in service of us, and technology can be hugely inspirational. That thing of like the man and machine, or woman indeed, and machine, that's the sort of the Kraftwerkian heart of playing live and messing with machines in front of an audience. It's fun to see a human wrestle with a machine and see what human things can come out of it, and us connecting with sort of machine sounds. That's very techno, but it's us that holds us back. It's our own sort of preconceived notions of what music should be, and putting music in boxes and slavishly adhering to patterns and styles is going to stagnate music styles. It's only when you do things that are wrong that you can discover new ways of doing things. And it's, as you can tell, Tony is obviously, because he's a DJ, he's actively seeking out music. He is trawling through Bandcamp, listening to Orange Milk Records and listening to different types of things. And we talked about it, I didn't mention it at the start, but in case you're not aware, like Tony not just makes techno, Tony does these beautiful ambient shows that are very transcendent and literally, which are, beautiful, gorgeous, meditative, smooth experiences, which are not rough and pointy and full of 909 kick drums and rides. But it's interesting when he did say, you've got to have the kick drum, you've got to have the, 909-ish sounds, and those are the sort of signposts of techno. And if you have that, everything else is fair game. I suppose you don't necessarily need to have those particular sounds, but it's just interesting, the idea that we can't escape the 909. But yeah, it's us that holds us back. It's us that holds us back. That is interesting. And the other thing where he's talking about the secret of listening, or the secret of improvisation, is to listen properly. Really, really, really paying attention to what you're doing. Because, I can only look inwardly at myself when I'm playing, or I think about what I'm doing when I play, and I am listening, and I'm just paying attention to the track, because only by paying attention does your brain go, oh, this is cool, this bit, and I can imagine what could come next. Oh, this is cool, you could then have some hats on this, or this is cool, you could then filter the, bass line a bit more, or whatever. It's like, only by listening intently do you know what could come to does your brain sort of focus and start imagining what could come next. And that might sound obvious, but it is hard. And there's definitely, I'm starting to recognize that personally, I've played with, when I mentioned that Moog thing, I was using completely different kit to what I would normally use when I play with my other live modular that I put together, but it sounded similar. There were definitely common themes and threads, and then that's a sign that it's my brain is starting to kind of learn a way of playing, which also sounds dangerously like something that is stagnating or in risk of it. So maybe we should all take a leaf out of Tony's book, which is the moment that something's starting to get comfortable, is you should throw it in the fucking bin and just start from scratch again. He's just afraid of being pigeonholed as the sort of modular guy. He's binned his modular, but he hasn't. It's obviously just sat in his studio, and he's playing this little Bleep and an Octatrack and Otto Boom and Bim or Bam, or whichever the reverb Otto and the compressor Otto, and that's his setup. He's just got like 3 little boxes or 4 little boxes on the table. So it is important to challenge yourself. I think also important to not just pile things upon things upon things. If there's one lesson you can learn from looking at surgeons' live setups, it's that they are incredibly simple. As he says, it's more fun that way. I think that's what he said. Was it more fun for me? It's just easier to get your head round. So think simple. That's something I'm trying to do consciously. And I'm actually, after I had this conversation with Tony, in fact, I actually started thinking again about a new live system. I want to try and build something that's more akin to that, based around this quadranted swarm, which is just a wonderful, wonderful sequencing, little monster of a sequencing synth that's very good for techno. So yeah, that's it. I want to thank you for listening. And if you've not listened to this show before, there's lots more like it. In fact, you should rewind and listen to the last episode with Sarah Davachi, because Tony is a big fan of Sarah's. And actually, Tony did say he really enjoyed that episode. So if Tony says he enjoyed it, then I'm sure you will too. Sarah's amazing, and more in the kind of ambient world, but that's the world Tony is into. So you should listen back to it and go trawl back. And the main thing is share this. Please share the podcast. If you enjoyed it, let your friends hear it too. And hopefully we can do more of them in 2021. Flip the heck in the flip. I want to thank our sponsors, Signal Sounds and Skillshare. Don't forget that link if you want to try the Skillshare thing. I genuinely recommend that. And there's loads of things you can teach yourself. I think I need to see if there's one on building a live modular and improvisation. That would be helpful. Bearing in mind, at all times, the law of Tony Surgeon. It's us that holds us back. Thanks very much. See you next time. Bye.